way smoother, and
Right.
the ones I've been in are way smoother and quieter than.
I think it's a perspective that anybody that's having an opinion on water quality in the state should have.
Yeah.
I know it's not easy to gain, but it's pretty incredible flying
Yeah,
over the
right. I mean,
Everglades,
yeah,
looking at the
that's a
water
really good
control
point.
structures, looking at the EAA. It's a pretty magnificent experience.
Do you go up a lot in the helicopters, or
Spent a little bit of time in a helicopter.
really?
Mm-hmm.
My son is 11 years old, buddy. He's wants to be a pilot and everything like that. So I'm in the last couple of years, I've really been getting an education on what plane is what, and and all this different aeronautical
Mm-hmm.
jargon and everything because before that I never really,
It's a great way to earn a living these days.
You're not
Can't
gonna
go wrong becoming a
private
pilot. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can get to a private pilot, you can.
He's all about it. We just got him that Microsoft Flight Simulator the other day.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I heard FedEx is actually the place to be if you're a pilot. If you can land a job with FedEx, that's the big money job.
that's the
Mhm.
Interesting. That's cool.
Apparently,
FedEx, here we go.
apparently they care more about the delivery of their materials than the airlines. But hey.
Yeah, right. Packages are more important than human beings.
Oh,
That's
man.
cool.
More complaints.
Yeah, I mean, strange. So, are we rolling now? Yeah, we're good. All right, we're rolling. All right. I'm just gonna kick this off here with my usual spiel. So,
Yeah.
This is the Connected by Water podcast, fueled by our very good friends at Papa's Pilar Rum, who remind us never to be a spectator. This year's limited edition release honors the legendary Greg Knoll. His journey from shaping boards at 11 to pioneering big wave surfing embodies the true spirit of the sport and lifestyle, on the whole inspiring creativity and community, which, of course, is what Connected by Water is all about, right? So it's an amazing rum that, like everything else Papa's Pilar does, is legendary. So grab a bottle and enjoy. We are a Waypoint hosted podcast. You can find us there. Also watch, listen, and do not forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, and smash those like and subscribe buttons, please. And before we introduce today's guests, we want to announce this week's Starbright Solutions Project Sea Safe Do-Gooder of the Week. And we're going to do this in a really unique way this week, right? Because our guest, Buddy Spottswood, you're going to announce the do-gooder that you nominated, which I think is pretty cool. And you're going to bring home a bucket to them filled with all the Starbright goodies. So who is that person this week?
Sure. So one of my longtime friends, Captain Chris Mandola, runs Far Out Fishing Charters down in Key West. I mean, he just embodies, what a conservation in a fisherman form looks like to me. Is very, very respectful about our resources. If he sees something floating, he's picking it up. I think he encourages folks to not necessarily take a bag limit if it's more than what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Just constantly doing the right thing. So couldn't be more honored to nominate my buddy Chris for the Starbright Do-Gooder. And
Awesome.
I'll be happy to take his bucket of equipment home because I know he does a lot of work keeping his boat clean.
Very, very cool. Very, very congratulations, Chris. So you are this week's do-gooder. And remember, if you want to nominate a do-gooder in your area, just message us on Instagram or Starbright's Conservation Director, Corey Redwine. And your nominee could win a very special Starbright Solutions prize pack, or as we call it, bucket, worth of fun for over $200. So, or you can nominate yourself if you're deserving. Ain't no shame in playing that game.
I didn't know that before we started,
Yeah.
Chris, so you're
Can
lucky.
we re-record that?
Well, I know a guy, I think. So, as always, listen, thank you to our sponsors, Papa's Pilar Rum, Starbright, and Olakai for your great support of our show. So, without further ado, today's guests, we have, and we're honored to have, you here for the first time, you here once again, right? Repeat offender. And we have the esteemed board member of the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council, among many other things, right? Robert Spottswood Jr., a.k.a. Buddy, and our good friend, seasoned outdoorsman, and all-around state of Florida conservation superhero, Travis Thompson. So,
How you doing?
Thank you very much. So I hope you like that title I gave you.
I do. I'll roll with that.
Yeah? All right, cool.
Pretty fitting.
Yeah, I'll roll with that.
So, yeah, I mean, listen, thank you guys very much for coming in today. I know you came in here from out of town in Key West. You were doing was some hunting with your family? Was it?
Yeah, so we've got a hunting lease just north of Okeechobee, and deer season opens September 14th. So my 4 kids and wife were up with me this weekend helping fill protein feeders and corn feeders, setting cameras, hanging stands, just getting ready.
And I saw some videos of a Nerf bow being like, I don't think the deer were in any danger, but there was definitely some spot and stalk going on with the Nerf bow, right?
Yeah, my 5-year-old was driving us around in a Polaris, and my 4-year-old was in the middle with her Nerf bow, and we saw some deer, and she looked over and asked if she could get out, and she ran around the front and walked up closer to him, and she let an arrow go. I think it went like 6 or 7 yards.
The deer just kind of looked at her like, what
it
are
was
you
a
doing?
good line. Yeah, the deer looked at us like, is the corn on the road yet? Can y'all get out of the way?
Oh my goodness, that's great.
But
Great.
it's a pretty special time hanging out with them out in the woods.
Yeah. So how many kids do you have?
I've got 4.
Wow.
My oldest will be
Good for
5
you.
next month.
Nice.
4 under 5.
Your
Actually,
oldest will be 5?
Let's not hang up on
sorry.
that for a second. 4 under 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got 4 and under at the moment.
Wow. So I mean, you got nothing to do then, right? All day long. Right? 'Cause you
well,
got 4 kids that take up all your time.
Trying to feed 4 kids these days has gotten pretty expensive, so I'm pretty busy at work.
Yeah, I'm
but-
having a tough enough time with 2.
Yeah, but their mom is absolutely incredible woman. My wife Stephanie couldn't ask for a better partner.
Yeah.
She loves the outdoors, and I just it's so important for me. It was how I was raised, being outdoors, and it just teaches so much responsibility at an early age. That,
Sure does.
There's nothing else that can compare. So I really, really appreciate the relationship we have and the time that we spend with our kids outside.
That's great, and we're probably going to get into a whole bunch of conservation stuff today too, on top of the other things that we want to jump into. So, as we always say in this show, it's always the hunters, the outdoorsmen, the sportsmen that seem to always steward and take care of the land greater, I think, than any other citizen in the United States of America does. So
we'd miss it the most if it disappeared.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct. It says we gotta save it so we can use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and we're all fathers, we're all family men, we're all Floridians here, and we all very much care about the state of Florida and its future and its path, and I think that's going to be exemplified here today. So, buddy, give me a little bit of background on you. I know that you're with 7th generation Key West family. I mean,
Yep.
you guys know your way around these parts. So,
Yeah, so my kids are the 8th generation from Key West. I've got several cousins that also and brothers and sisters. My brother does not yet have kids, but my sisters do. So we've got the 8th generation of Key Westers, let alone Floridians.
okay.
I don't know any of them yet that don't like to fish. They're all young enough still that they're really
They don't know any
connected
different,
to
right?
it. I'm sure we'll lose 1 or 2 of them along the way.
Yeah.
But I'll do my best to keep them plugged in. My family came from Green Turtle Cay in the Bahamas in 1834. Multiple generations of shipbuilders, lawyers, you name it. We've done it down there in Key West.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've earned a pretty unique perspective on the environment, culture, business, all those things that really, connected by water. I mean, we really are, all of us, and in the Keys, it doesn't get any more real than that. Everything that we do, our economy is based on the water. So, it's been a special place to grow up, and seeing how our business has kind of unfolded and all the impacts and continued pressure on our business as a result of, declining access to fisheries, water quality issues. I mean, these are really important things that not only mean a lot to me and how I raise my family, but how our business operates. And so I've gotten pretty involved. My father really, started the family out in kind of the conservation related, efforts. Got on Fish and Wildlife Commission. He became the chairman. I think really,
When was that?
2016?
16, yeah.
Okay.
2016.
Somewhere
served
in there.
Two. He was reappointed. He was appointed by Scott, reappointed by DeSantis, and then ultimately rolled off
After 8 years, I guess.
after 8 years. Yeah.
And I'll say this because you have a bias here, but one of the most respected commissioners we've ever had, like his approach to not just fisheries management, but conservation in general. Like he would listen to anybody, he'd have a conversation with anybody, just a legend out there. And I'm sure you idolized him growing up, but also like there's a lot of fans. You can go to CCA, you can go to ASA, you can ask them like, name your top 3 commissioners, your top 5 commissioners, and Spottswood's name's on that list. Like great guy, incredible guy.
That's fantastic. One of the things we say a lot on the show is that, comparatively speaking in the United States of America, your family could probably speak to this more than most families can. Florida is like one of the last frontiers, I think, to truly be settled. Like, I think even like out west was settled like before, because there's a multitude of reasons of why people just didn't want to live in Florida pre the air conditioning era, right? Alone. And, it just wasn't a place that we talked about this, I think, on your last episode, where it just was not a place that, was
hospitable.
You had to be really tough to be here.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So
who were you telling me about the other day that rowboated to Key West and then brought his wife over or something? Like,
well, that was my great grandfather, John D. Bartlam, who built a house in Green Turtle, subsequently became a shipbuilder, built a boat in Green Turtle, disassembled his house, put it on the boat, sailed it to Key West, rebuilt that house. It still stands in Key West, the Bartlam house.
Come on.
He was 34 years old with his wife and 4 kids.
Can you imagine? When would that have been? Like
1836.
He rode from where?
Not rowed. It was a sailboat. He sailed from Green Turtle Cay in Abacos in the Bahamas to Key West.
And what year was this?
1836. He went on a scouting mission in 1834. So that's the guy that brought you guys. He brought part of our family.
Okay.
We've been there for so long. We've got a lot of influences, and
you still got a lot of family in Green Turtle, or are you guys out of there? At this point?
we don't have any direct family. In Green Turtle anymore. Now we've started after Hurricane Dorian, of all events. It was the first time I went to Green Turtle, and we've got a sister city. We had a pretty deep connection between Key West and Green Turtle Cay. And I spent a lot of time going over there and taking supplies and getting to know the people there. Really just because we felt called to do it. It really is a special place, and look forward to spending more time
there. That whole movement after Hurricane Dorian, what South Florida alone did.
Oh my gosh,
was pretty impressive. I mean, we had our hand in it too. I mean, as did many people. So as much as I want to say, we raised all this money, we did. We $40,000 we raised in shirt sales that went over to buying lumber for people over there, but which is our little part that we did. But we know that there were so many people that did so much more. So it was impressive to see.
We sent nearly $500,000 in materials out of Key West.
That's great.
On DC-3s to Treasure, and then move them over on a ferry. We were there within 2 days after the storm. We had brought so much stuff in. The Prime Minister actually, the third trip I was there, the Prime Minister landed and they came over the sheet and were asking about all the stuff we were bringing in. So we caught some attention. But it I think also part of the reason why Green Turtle got back up and running so fast and got on its feet.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And listen, and you want something mobilized, you want something done. I mean, there's no better group to access than the South Florida fishing and hunting communities. I mean, those are very, very roll your sleeves up mentality when it comes to.
I remember after Ian, you dang sure wanted duck hunters after Ian, because the airboats and the mud boats and everything else running around in Inglewood and Port Charlotte and pulling
very
people
capable people.
Yeah, those are people that care.
Yeah,
and you have your neighbors back, which is what you guys were talking about. That's your neighbors. That's. You don't live there, but that's
to some extent. I think a lot of people view the Bahamas as our neighbors, our brothers in the Bahamas. Yep. Especially where I'm from. The Currys, the Allberries, Bartlams, you name it. I mean, most of the lineage in Key West came
all
from
legacy families for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you're Florida born and bred. I mean, through and through. I mean, as we all are. So. I mean, you went to UF, Nova, I saw, when I was reading up on you, and your family just runs a whole bunch of businesses, and you guys are, very successful outdoorsmen, and it's just your heart, right?
Yeah. I did. I went to University of Florida, studied food and resource economics, ended up going to law school at Nova, studied environmental stuff, worked in the Everglades Law Center with Richard Grosso. Really just, Florida means so much to us, and when I say Florida, I mean the outdoors. The woods and the water mean so much to the way we like to spend our time, to the way we make our money. It's pretty important, and so I don't know what else there is to do other than to make sure that we're leaving it behind better than we found it, and we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we do, absolutely. And the only reason I really wanted to bring that up is just so the people listening and watching this kind of understand that the guy we're bringing on isn't, I don't want to say just some fisherman. You know what I mean? But you're an intelligent guy and a very accomplished individual and everything like that. So I just wanted to kind of make that clear to the audience that's listening and watching this. So when we do get into some of our issues that we're going to talk about today, that it's not just some guy jumping off a boat and saying, "Hey, we need to do this."
Unfortunately, I don't fish too much anymore these days. That whole conversation about 4 kids and everything else. But
yeah, I get
before
that.
I was 18, I might have possibly spent more time on the water than at school. That's for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, nowadays when I talk to you, first off, when you talk to him, it's rare that there's not a kid in the room.
Right.
And second off, when you talk to him, they're usually going to the sandbar after work, like
Yep.
that afternoon or whatever.
Yeah.
They're headed to the sandbar. But it's putting the kids in the water, touching the place where you're at, and they're falling in love with it.
Man, if I get out, and I make it a point, I get up pretty early. So make it a point trying to have breakfast. I get up and work, trying to have breakfast with my kids and my wife, work some more, and try to have dinner with them every single day.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get off early enough, I like to get home and take them to the sandbar. It's a 10-minute run from our dock to the sandbar to Snipes Point, especially when we catch it at a low tide. And it's the nights I sleep the best, certainly when the kids are sleeping the best. So, getting them out there, and you don't have to worry about them, right? I mean, like, even at home, I worry more at my house because of the street and other stuff. I get to the sandbar, and it's just like they're off, looking at conch shells and looking at crabs and chasing fish. And when they get back to the boat, they're tuckered out and ready for bed. And
you
it's
can't
awesome.
get more connected by water than that.
No, you cannot.
So we are all sitting here at this table, and we have our Yes on 2 hats on, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm proud to be wearing this hat today. Thank you very much for bringing this hat to me today, because it really does mean so much. And the guys sitting in front of me, you two, are really crucial in this fight, right? What we're trying to accomplish here. And I want to get into it right off the bat. We talked about it when you were here last time, but we kind of had it on the end of the episode. We discussed it when Mike Elfenbein was here on his last episode, and we brought it up a few times on some other episodes too. I want you guys, though, to explain to me why it's so important. I know why it's so important, but I want to hear it from you guys.
I'm going to let him go first.
Go for
because,
it.
Sure.
Like,
Travis is good at plugging the holes on this one.
You've heard from me on this stuff. Like, you can go back and listen to that episode, but I want to, like...
Yep, sure.
Yeah, so what resonates most with me is pretty simple, right? The nature of the state of Florida is changing.
Mm-hmm.
The percentage of families that are here that are multi-generational is decreasing over time. There's more people coming here. Public polling over the last several years has shown a decrease in public support for fishing and hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've gone somewhere from 80% to about 60%, getting close to the threshold that we would need.
It's a pretty big jump.
Pretty big jump. Even if that occurred over 2 decades, pretty big jump, right? Mm-hmm. And we've got probably our last window here to make sure that we don't ever, aren't ever faced with a change in the legislature that then tries to do things like restrict hunting or restrict fishing. These are things that are happening in other states. This isn't a, alarmist type thing. It is actually happening. And so here in Florida, I think that we all need to just look at each other and say we all agree here, right, that fishing and hunting are important tools for conservation, both from their direct impacts of conservation, but also from the funding sources that they produce and the dollars that they produce in order to provide for conservation and preservation of lands and resources.
Yeah, not to cut you off, but you said something really important there, that the fishing and hunting is important for the conservation aspect of. And I want to kind of cross the line on that to the other side, to the people that don't hunt and fish, mm-hmm. that may be listening to this episode. Everything you want to achieve environmentally speaking, right? The hunters, fishermen, outdoorsmen, boots on the ground in this situation, and need to be supported in the matter. And it only helps everybody.
As a guy that spends time outdoors all the time, do you know where I see snail kites? Private lands. Mm-hmm. Lands that are conserved, lands that are used for hunting, lands that are, you know where you see gopher tortoises? Lands that are conserved. You know where you see scrub jays? These are not animals that we're looking to pursue or hunt. These are wildlife species that we care about. Yeah, like if you are a bird watcher, just a person that likes the idea of there being bald eagles or likes the idea of there being caracaras, hunters and anglers are providing habitat where those animals are surviving and thriving. And we see the same thing on the fisheries. I mean, it's truly, you talk about the dollars. Mm-hmm. So the wildlife corridor is a really celebrated thing in the state of Florida. The number from Archibald was 19% of the wildlife corridor was acquired with sportsmen's dollars. Mm-hmm. So that's hunter, angler dollars or federal dollars that have come back because of hunters, anglers that have been acquired. Almost 60% of the wildlife corridor has hunting as a revenue stream. So that's not just public lands. That's also private lands where you've got a rancher or whatever that has an easement, and they've stacked revenue streams with hunting or other things on top of it. But hunting is crucial to that. And that's to say nothing about like the economic impact of fishing in our state, $14 billion, $13.8 billion. And a lot of people don't know when you get federal dollars back. So in the fishing side, we call it Dingle Johnson or the Sport Fish Restoration Fund.
That's right.
There is sport fish restoration dollars in almost every public boat ramp in the state. Almost every public boat ramp in the state has sport fish restoration dollars in it. Meaning it's either gone to build the ramp in some kind of partnership grant with a DEP or a municipality, or it's gone to maintaining and upkeeping that ramp somehow. And so if you're a kayaker and you don't own a fishing rod, you're a pontoon boater that wants to drive around and have your buddies drink beer, you're a jet skier, you're a water skier, a fisherman is helping get you access to the water body that you're recreating on. I don't understand why this doesn't have like 99.9% approval. When you consider all that stuff, it's like a no-brainer, right?
Awareness. Yeah. And then layer on top of that, every hunting or fishing, good that's sold, there's a federal tax on it.
Excise tax.
Yeah. Pushes dollars back to conservation initiatives. And so it's really for anybody to suggest that we would have what we have today from a conservation perspective without outdoorsmen I can't even believe somebody could come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, Yes on 2 is going to do what for us?
Yes on 2 is going to provide for a constitutional amendment to forever protect the right to fish and hunt, subject to FWC's regulation and all that sort of stuff, right? But just to make sure that we are utilizing fishing and hunting as preferred methods for conservation and other where appropriate. And I think it's something that it's pretty common sense. Some people we talk to say, we don't have that right now. And I say, well, where is it in the Constitution, right? And if it's not there, then it's subject to legislative, session every year. It's there, or budget, you name it. What type of political issues can change us in the future? So I think we're at the point where we as Floridians will say, look, in this state, we're always going to allow fishing and hunting, reasonable fishing and hunting, sustainable fishing and hunting. And it's a key component of conservation for the state of Florida. And we're going to be the leader in conservation as we always have been for a long time to come.
Yeah, I agree. I had a guest on the show, can't remember who it was, but I asked them the question. I'm like, hey, you all in on yes on 2? And I think they responded, I didn't realize our right to hunt and fish were under threat, right? But they are, aren't they?
I just gave you the public polling information, right? It's dwindling.
I ask people all the time, do you lock your door at night? Have you been robbed?
Yeah.
Like, do you wait till you're robbed to lock your door, or do you proactively go lock your door? Like, that seems like kind of a silly approach to that.
Yeah, it seems silly to me too that and also there's other things too. Like, I don't know if you want to get into like the wilderness designation. I think has something to do with it, doesn't it?
Well,
or no.
That's more of a federal. That's a federal designation.
Okay,
like so it is a separate fight, but
separate fight, but it doesn't. Is it really like not crossing over into this?
No, because that's a federal designation
versus
a state law or a state right.
Gotcha.
I do think it's important to talk about, and Buddy being here can back me up on this a little bit because I have no law information in my head whatsoever. Like I watch Suits on TV, but
I went to art school.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's some misinformation floating around, and like we don't have to spend much time on it, but people are worried about the idea of traditional methods. Does that undo it and make it into where we can like harpoon manatees or
go to the reef and throw a stick of dynamite in and scoop up the
yellowtail? Undo the gill netting amendment.
It's really ridiculous.
It does not undo any of that stuff, and I think the term is in para materia. Did I say that right? Where you read all the statutes in whole. So the way it's been explained to me is the statutes are complementary. They work in harmonization. They're not standalone. So like the gill net amendment is not undone.
You'd have to have express language in this amendment to say this is preempting the gill, net ban. Right. Which is not being done. In fact,
like
the
this
opposite
contract
is,
supersedes all other contracts.
Right. Like you would have to have something like that, and we don't because we love the gill net ban. And beyond that, like there's a lot of, this is going to undo private property rights because in other states it includes private property rights. And I asked him that question, and we've talked to a number of lawyers, and they're like, no, that doesn't undo private property rights. Like, you have private property rights already in Florida. Trespassing is illegal. And the example somebody gave to me, it wasn't you, but it was like, you have the right to free speech, but you can't go on my yard and exercise your right to free speech.
Right.
Similarly, you have the right to fish and hunt. If this passes, you can't go into someone else's property and exercise that right. They don't trample on each other. And it's like this kind of myth out there that people are pushing because people wonder why we need this. It's because people would go create a narrative around it and push for not having it. Like it's crazy.
It really is crazy. And I find a lot of the people that are pushing that narrative are the exact same people who continue to push for further regulation restriction on the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Right. And so like you clearly understand that it works there, but yet you can push this narrative that this is going to be an unconstrained, free for all. It's just, I really don't think it's worth a direct response, but we're talking about it here, so just thought we'd cover it.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, and this kind of spills over into some other things like clean water issues and healthy lands issues as well.
I mean, if you want wild lands, if you want clean water, a right to fish and hunt, make sure that you've got wild lands and clean water. Like it's that simple to connect those two things.
Yeah.
Like he's been at deer camp, but I'm telling you, like he's driving around. Did you shoot any deer? No, because the season's not open. You're riding around with your family. You're looking at wildlife. You're enjoying wild Florida. Where are you doing that?
And I promise you can come to my deer camp and see more deer and more wading birds and more turkeys than most other places, right? And we're spending a lot of time out there. And I don't mean to say mine, but I mean, a managed deer camp, right? Where people are actively working on the land. They're burning, they're mowing, they're putting out feed, they're removing invasives, they're taking care of predators. I mean, it's just incredible what you see happen in places like that. And I'm, we talked about a little story of my daughter earlier, but I'll ride down the road and my kids can talk and look and point and see deer that are 5, 6, 7 steps away from them. That doesn't happen without those animals really truly feeling like we are there, even though we do hunt them from time to time, which is also part of our management program, right? I mean, we're removing the older, more mature deer that are causing injuries that aren't very productive in what they're doing out there, and making that stock better. And so it's really it's a win-win for everybody. We get an immense value out of it from my family, connectivity, connecting with the land, and the wildlife's benefiting from it.
And that old land, when it rains, that water's going down or it's holding where it's going to be and get clean. But beyond that too, I wanted to add, you're also feeding your family.
Oh yeah.
Like you're taking that deer out and you're providing countless meals for your family or what. Like it's no different than taking a fish or like.
Yeah.
I've slipped off a little bit because I've been a little busy, but I was doing a couple hunting trips and we had my first and second child. We were eating probably 80-90% wild red meat. Yeah.
Oh, or just what wild game in general?
Whether it was nilgai or venison or elk, or fish. I mean, we really, and we care about, my wife more than I, God bless her for it, cares a lot about what we eat, and really starting to focus more on that.
Yeah, and that's a really important point to bring up, to opposed to the other factor where people don't see that side of it and they just say, oh, you're just hunting for sport, which is okay, but you know what I mean? They don't see that side of it, like, ever, really.
No, I'll keep a totem or a rack or something as a memento of a hunt if it's a good one and hang it up. But really, I'm in it for the meat of that deer that lived a wild life, and you ethically, humanely ended it, and then you take the food. Like, that's what's better than that.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with seeking gratification from all the work that we do from a conservation perspective. I mean, we put a lot of work into going out there and to growing these, big, healthy, mature animals and deer, and you should enjoy it. And you should, whether it's a Euro mount or a picture, remember that. And there's a profound emotional experience that goes along with working for it and harvesting an animal and then taking it home. And if you're out there listening and have not ever been out hunting, I encourage you to try it one time.
It's an innately human process that you should be able to go through.
Yes. There are so many layers to it, really. And there's even the traditional value of it too. We always say that as a studio, we have a series of just apparel that we have that's called Celebrate Tradition. And we believe that a tradition is something to be celebrated, not ignored or denied or anything like that. So
the only thing cooler than the actual experience taking your first animal is watching somebody else that you assisted take their first animal and watching that emotion, watching the process, watching what they go through. I mean, it is it really connects you back with who you are as a human and connects you back to nature.
And even fishing is the same way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When you got that one fish that's eluded you and you're with that person that's like, man, I just want to catch that never caught a big tarpon. Never caught a big tarpon. When that person finally does it, it's like, you know,
It's incredible.
yeah,
Yeah, especially when it's children. It's pretty awesome.
Especially when it's your kid.
Yeah.
Not like, I mean,
Yeah.
but I remember both of my kids when they were little and they caught their first fish. Like they're squealing and can we keep it? And like there's something innately human in that, like that connection to what comes over the side of the boat and everything.
Yeah.
Like
Well, we brought it up before where it's like, listen, like there is a connection. This is part of our connected by water theory, right? Because there's multiple layers to that terminology as well. But when you're on a boat fishing with someone, and you guys have a great day of fishing, right? Just pure and simple. Just have a great, or you've caught really, really nice, huge mahi or wahoo that day. Like you remember that. Like you remember that with that person, and you remember that better. And if you hooked up with a guy and you guys went out on a night on the town, like, okay, that was fun and all like that, but you remember that more than you'll remember that other moment that's fleeting.
Absolutely.
One's a
right?
story you'll share with other people. The other is not.
Well, I think we've come to the conclusion on, you brought up the proper word, innate. Like there's something innately human to us, as, evolutionarily speaking, you know what I mean, about hunting and gathering and doing that as a practice. You know what I mean? And it's more meaningful. It has a deeper meaning inside of you.
we all have like some connection to Florida, right? Like
Right.
all of us, but
Yeah.
everybody listening to this has some connection to Florida. That's why
Right.
they're listening to it. I would tell people, like, imagine Florida without hunting and fishing. Is that a Florida you want to be in?
I don't think it's a Florida that's survivable.
I
to
agree.
be honest with
like,
you.
I don't. I think your natural resources and how you manage them determines your success as a civilization. I believe that. Like,
Yeah.
So if that's the case, vote yes on Amendment 2. You don't have to worry about it. Like, because by the
Yeah.
time that becomes a problem 2, 3, 4, 500 years down the road, like,
well, we still have the other side of this coin, which is, we still have to have the fish and the animals to go out and chase, right?
Right.
And to grow. And so that's, this is kind of step one, but we really got to get back to focusing on, both on our aquatic and terrestrial habitats, building better habitats, removing invasives, removing threats to animals, improving water quality, improving air quality. These are real threats that, I want to dispense with this idea that our right to fish and hunt will ever be, controlled by the legislature or
Right.
something else, right? And then let's get past that.
That's
Let's all
step
go
one.
focus on how we are creating the best access and the best return for people who are going out there, which means having a thriving, fish stock and animal stock.
Yeah, well put. Well put. I mean, and unlike many other issues where you could sometimes see both sides of it, I really just see one side of this, and it's just a no-brainer. It's one of the smarter ideas that have been brought to the table in any election in recent years, in my mind.
I'm proud of it. We're proud of it.
Yeah.
Like, we've worked really hard on it, and I'm hopeful and confident in the people of Florida that they're gonna show up and vote yes on this. It's bipartisan. It's
Yep.
passed the legislature
Absolutely.
154-1, and you'll get people out there to try to spin it one way or the other. It's a no-brainer idea. Like,
Yeah, it is bipartisan.
it's a no-brainer
Yeah,
idea.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Let's switch gears a little bit here, right? So let's talk a little bit about the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council,
Sure.
right? And both their role in setting regulations and the do's and don'ts of everything, and also your role within that organization.
Sure. So the South Atlantic Marine Fisheries Council, South Atlantic Marine Fisheries Management Council, regulates from North Carolina to Key West, federal waters.
Yeah.
That council is effectively an advisory council to NOAA, right, to the secretary. And so we sit 4 times a year in meetings and go through everything from mahi and pelagics to snapper grouper in rulemaking. And I probably 5 years ago started to get pretty interested in how our regulators, our agencies, were going about setting fisheries rules, right? Who's determining how many of this fish we can catch? Why are we setting these bag limits? Why are we setting these size limits, seasons? So I started and I went through MREP. I spent a lot of time, my father was on FWC, so I spent a lot of time with him really talking. I mean, I don't think there was a meeting he went to that we didn't sit down and talk through the agenda and talk through all the items from
That's cool.
From the bear hunt to whatever else. I mean, it was, spent a lot of time with him, and I spent a lot of time on the water. So, and not just me. My dad would ask me for phone numbers for people, whether it's Brett Martina in Apalachicola or somebody on the East Coast. He wanted to go talk to people, and that's what he was really, really good at. He's really good at connecting to people, listening to them, really being open-minded. I mean, my dad would come to the table and say, well, this is what I think, but show me new facts. I'm happy to change my mind and to, move forward in a new direction. So MREP, I got on TNC. I got on TNC's, committee trying to help with fisheries data and input to data. Kind of ran the end of that road and realized like I need to get to another place in order to have a better impact in this. Started working on getting on to the council. That came together pretty quickly for me. So I've been through, about a year at this point. And I got to tell you, there's a lot involved in it. And there's a lot of questions that I still have about, the process and how we're doing things. And so, kind of simultaneous while I'm doing that, I'm also trying to figure out how to move forward some initiatives that will help us get some more information.
As a citizen, as a fisherman, as a...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting to point that out that way, too. That is the perspective I think that everybody should have in this conversation that we're having here. And also just to let people know that, in the perspective of the conversation, for the sake of the audience, just to let them know that the guy I have sitting here in front of me, if they say, oh, who's setting the regulation for this, or who are we talking to? You're part of that group.
I'm part of the group, and so I think, so Travis is right. In my capacity as a council member, there's certain things I can and cannot say.
Okay.
And we're really kind of required to manage in accordance with Magnus and Stephen. As a private individual, I have some different kind of thoughts and ideas that I want to share with kind of how ultimately we will be able to make some progress, right?
Okay,
and so
cool.
Kind of just to draw a little distinction, in my private life, I've been very, very involved with the habitat support structure in Monroe County. Most people know that as artificial reef program. So I've been able over the last couple of years, 2 years, to get $15 million appropriated from the legislature to Monroe County to work on a habitat support structure program. That's required a lot of work with, even though it's in state waters for the most part, NOAA, who controls the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, just trying to start building this discussion about, guys, look, there's the one side, which is setting the rules and regulating the fish stocks based on what we're seeing from the data. The other side is, what are we doing to create better habitat to support healthier fish stocks? We can't just sit here and manage this thing, to its decline. That's unacceptable. We've got to get proactive about, and this is a page that I've taken out of the, terrestrial land management book. Had it not been for me spending a lot of time on hunting leases and with folks like Travis and the Baldwin family and other people who are in land management, understanding the outputs that come from the inputs on that side, I'm like, man, why aren't we doing this more in our oceans? And, aquaculture is a separate thing. I'm talking about, managing and promoting natural fish stocks through supplementing habitat. Artificial reef has a bad connotation because it has the word artificial. I'm just talking about man-made structures. I'm talking about limestone, steel, things that aren't detrimental to the environment in and of themselves, but provide great structure and relief for bait fish, and then ultimately, all of the food chain that comes along with that.
Yeah, wow, that's great. The habitat. You're right, and that is utmost. I mean, if the fish don't have a place to live, don't have a place to thrive, then
if they don't have a place to live, they don't have a place to thrive, and then we got nothing to catch.
Right.
And that's, the recreational, commercial, our culture. I mean, there's so much, our hotel business, everything we have in the Keys, and there's been a lot of time and effort spent on coral, and I'm not trying to take away from that, but at the end of the day, we've lost 90% of our corals in Florida Keys. Our reef is dead. I mean, it's just dead.
It's in a horrible situation
it's dead.
Right now.
So we've got 5 to 6 years before those structures start to deteriorate because there's no living organism holding them together. So we're going to have no structure, no relief, or anything on the reef left. We cannot wait for, some temperature resilient coral that's going to take 150 years to grow back to be, found or created. Now, I'd like for all that to happen. Great, but we need to.
We should be working on that, but
I need a bridge. I need a bridge for the marine life between what's there now and what's going to be in the future.
What is that bridge?
Artificial structures, man-made structures. It's putting out, limestone, rubble, shipwrecks, you name it. But you need relief. You need places for bait fish to hide and live and on up the food chain.
So, I mean, what about some of these organizations, like, for example, like an iCare, who's doing, like, outplanting? Do you think that's really making an impact right now?
I don't think it. Other than the fact that some of those outplantings come with,
I mean, there's other organizations. I just brought them up as an example.
Well, they come with anchors and lines and buoys, and so like it's somewhat funny, but they are actually putting out artificial reefs now in order to create these outplantings. I think those are actually creating some structure, so they are having some impact.
Right.
I don't think the actual planting is yet.
Okay.
But the process of trying to do that is providing some structure. Now they're pulling it out every once in a while, so it's not as beneficial as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a really, really long-term solution.
Mm-hmm.
If we can even figure it out. But most of the stuff we're putting back in, I mean, you go figure this out, you go replant it, and then we have record-breaking high temperatures again that you weren't expecting. So this environment's just changing, and that's just something we've got to accept. And rather than trying to control it, we need to adapt to it. And I think at this point we're in kind of a transitional period where our reef track has died. There's been some new deep water reefs identified. There's some new stuff coming on, but how is the earth evolving to, I don't even know if the same fish stocks we have today will survive on those reefs in the future. But at least for the short term, next 10, 15, 20 years, we got a lot hanging in the balance from an economic perspective, cultural perspective, food supply perspective, and we really need to get involved in making sure that we're managing that the right way.
I think we are definitely at a crucial point in all of this, like not even just the reefs, but I think just in Florida in general. I mean, we've discussed this before about, I think the biggest problem, let's shifting our focus more to like Everglades and like the center of the state. I think the biggest problem that we have is sprawl, right? Mm-hmm. And just everything that creeps in from that is causing all these other problems that we're starting to see that just like cause and effect from that, right? But neither here nor there.
And look, sprawl is something, you and I talked a little bit about, my history with Richard Grosso and some of the other folks, and I'll have this conversation over and over and over. Florida's not going to stop growing.
That's the thing.
There is no one's going to stop that.
Right.
So how do we grow better?
Exactly. And this thank you for bringing it, because that's kind of the point I'm getting at. Because you talked about, where is this growth? How do we adapt to it? And I'm like, okay, look at the state of Florida. We are at that crucial point. How do we? You couldn't have put it better.
And people don't like development, but in my mind, it's like, okay, well, instead of sprawl, like let's go identify areas that have been developed that are past their useful life, that maybe weren't done as efficiently as possible, that are have low density, but it's already the infrastructure is already there. And I mean, people don't want to hear this, but I'd rather see some environmental dollars, conservation dollars going to subsidizing development in areas. We'd rather see it than in places that's easier to build on, because you don't have to deal with removing old buildings or
we just talked about this a couple weeks ago with the old shopping centers that get abandoned.
The idea of redevelopment,
right?
Yeah, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity in front of us. And look, I think that this Yes on 2 campaign has residual effects for the state of Florida. I think this awareness campaign and getting this group of people engaged, these are the types of conversations that we need to be having as Floridians, and not sitting in the background or hiding in the woods or hiding out in the water. I mean, we need to get to the table and have these discussions.
Because if you can't sit down and I'm saying this is true, but if you're anti-development, you're pro-development, we've got to figure something out in the middle. If we can't sit down and have a conversation about it, we're not going anywhere, because you entrench on two sides and you don't ever move to the middle.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I think when it comes to like the healthiness and the flourishing of Florida, it has to be really a bipartisan thing. Like if you want to say people that are entrenched, like one side or the other, it's got to be across the aisle situation.
I'm not even talking that. I'm saying it's just got to be collaborative. Like it has nothing to do with party. Like it's got to be collaborative.
Yeah, but I think ultimately when it gets to that point, I think that's like, listen, we're talking about the good of the state here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So let's all come to consensus.
You don't need to wear a label to come in and have this discussion.
Correct.
Just sit down at the table.
No, we've got to do a better job of doing that though. And that's to your point. I've seen that too. Like Yes on 2, we're working towards obviously passing this, because you said it's a step one. But also there's a lot of good conversations coming out of that are like, hey, what about this issue? What about that thing? Let's talk about that. Like, and we don't know. We got to wrestle with it.
And we got to get organized, right? I mean, the outdoorsmen, again, regardless of party affiliation, the outdoorsmen need to get organized. And that means everything from the duck hunters, the deer hunters, rec fishermen, commercial fishermen. Everybody's going to have to come together here and figure out, we all are working towards the same goal, but we've kind of gotten pushed to our own corners and fighting with each other, especially on the fishing side.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of those issues, I have to bring it up, is the American red snapper issue, right? And which has seemingly been a very, very hot topic in recent years. And, some people say that, hey, up here around Stewart area, up out here in the Gulf, we're overrun with them. It's totally fine. Like, why the limitations? Maybe not here locally for us on like here in Pompano and everything like that. Not so much, but other people are saying, why are we limited to just like one day? I mean, what would you say to those guys?
You're asking that to me, right?
No, I'm not.
Come on, Travis, fill us in.
I'm asking. I'm throwing that out into the ether.
So look, we're limited to one day because there was I think like I'll forgive me if I'm wrong.
I only ask this, right, because listen, my big constituency on my end is mostly fishermen, right?
For sure.
So I bring a guy and you like to the table, and I don't ask you this. They're
I promise
be,
you,
why didn't you ask him this question?
I got an email from all of them. I promise.
Yeah.
But the answer to that is because the way that the data has been produced, the data that we have says you can only take 41,000 red snappers in the South Atlantic, and the majority of that quota was being eaten up by dead discards off the bat. So as a result of us going out and fishing for other snapper group or complex and not having a red snapper season at that time, we're throwing back red snappers, a lot of them, in order to catch the other grouper, gag grouper.
Are you familiar with dead discards? Okay. Like the mortality of, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, when you pull a fish up from deep, they get barotrauma. The likelihood of that fish surviving is fairly low. Now we do have some advancement with descending devices and other things that are helping, but again, that's creating frustration with the fishermen because none of that is being taken into account and giving back more quota, right? So they didn't look at it and say, oh, but because of descending devices, we can assume a 50% dead discard mortality instead of 80%. That hasn't happened, so we're continuing to assume that we have all these dead discards, not giving any credit for best fishing practices, not accounting for shark depredation, which is another issue in and of itself. But at the end of the day, what was left of that is we think we can maybe have a one-day season, right, and not overfish the stock. I will say that, and if you're familiar with it, that one-day season was passed by the regional administrator, not by the council. The council was unable to move this forward based on the information we had. Mostly, I think the council mostly looking at the recreational effort as an issue, and there was a report that came out from the Southeast Science Center that the recreational effort might have been overestimated by up to 40%. So just a lot of, uncertainty and not knowing exactly what's going on there, and quite frankly, just the very simple fact that every single person you talk to, their in-person account is the exact opposite of what we're being told on paper, right? So much so that I think in reality, I think red snapper are now starting to probably have a negative impact on other snapper grouper complexes and stocks. So this issue might continue to kind of compound itself.
I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, do you feel like the science community is setting the parameters for most of what the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council is deciding? Or you said you're advising?
So I say it's advisory because to some extent, the council is under Magnuson-Stevens is obligated to take certain actions when overfishing is occurring. Right, and that's driven by science and data that's coming to us, and so to some extent, the council is somewhat confined in its decision making ability.
Right.
And then even so, there's certain times where even if the council made a recommendation, Magnuson-Stevens might require the secretary to make a different determination.
Gotcha.
And so I think there's been a reauthorization a couple of times of Magnuson-Stevens. May or may not be, again, not in my capacity as a council member, but as a private citizen, I certainly think there are some things that we could revisit, look at, update. I think Magnuson-Stevens was, the main driving purpose was to create an exclusionary zone to stop the Chinese from coming in and fishing in American waters.
Right.
And then it's been used and applied to a lot of different things. And where we live, in South Florida particularly, with the number of species in our ecosystem, it there seems to be a little bit of a clunk or disconnect there in how that's working.
Yeah, because some people in the fishing community would say that the scientific community that's sampling, their methods aren't the best, and they're using methods that necessarily the traditional fishing community wouldn't use, and it kind of differs.
I'm going to say something really, really unpopular.
Okay.
Most of that is our fault as fishermen. We have for years refused to want to give data, right?
Right.
You don't want to tell people what you're catching. You don't want to tell them where you're going. You don't want it. So what happens? Well, they need something to go from. So they pick up the phone and they do a coastal survey. They start calling people and asking them. And I'm a fisherman. We've all done it, but we all tell fish tales, right? So when you call somebody and ask them what they caught, you're probably not going to get the, but all jokes aside, you're asking people from memory to go back and tell you things. They may have not remembered exactly what they actually caught. So then result of that is, we think that MREP, this, recreational effort survey, has landed us in a place where there's a disconnect between the regulations and what's actually going on in the water.
Right. I mean, I definitely think, I can kind of back up the fishing community on this, where I think there's definitely a disconnect between the scientific community and the angling community. Like, for sure. Like, they definitely don't agree. What those sampling methods are that are disagreed with, I'm not even going to get into, like, whatever. It's not for me to criticize. But just say that's just, it's just.
Well, I think the scientific community, and look, a lot of really good people, smart people.
Sure.
I think doing the best they can within the parameters they were given. But that's just it. We need a little bit different direction. A lot of really good, capable, smart people. I just think they need some better inputs. And, that's really, I think we'll get to this, exempt fishing permit program.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to bring up next was the EFPs that we wanted to talk about, the exempt fishing permit. And I want to really dive deep into that because as I was kind of reading through some of the details, so that when I first heard about it, right, and the whole 15 species thing and everything like that, my initial response was, I and then I read through the details of it, and I'm like, okay, I kind of see where you're going with the program a little bit. So, but you explain that better.
I think I called you and was like, hey, you need to look into these EFPs. Like, this is
right. Well, that's when I first looked at it, and I couldn't really wrap my head around the whole thing, like at first glance. But as I kind of read a little bit through some of the paperwork of it, I was like, okay, but all right. I'm willing to sit there and listen to this.
Yeah.
So explain it to me.
Sure.
And all of us, really.
So Jessica McCauley with Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and a few other folks there that are really, really bright, really, really good people. I've had some access to them, been able to sit down and work with them and talk with them. And so as this kind of red snapper thing was coming up, and like man, Pops, you got black bear and I got red snapper. I'm not sure where I'd rather be sitting.
Yeah.
But as it was coming up, I'm like, Jessica, what do we do about this? Like, we're gonna get destroyed. Do we just close down red snapper? Like, what are we doing? And so we ended up talking and brainstorming and going through some ideas. And you can do an exempted fishing permit if it's based on a research program.
Right.
Right. Like that's what it really is. It's a research program. And so we said, well, why don't we run a exempted fishing permit, give people some more red snapper access, but let's really do it to try to figure out how to try to fix our data collection program.
I think this is where the area where, like, we've been talking about shark depredation on this show since the very beginning. It's 5 years, right?
1985.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, like, heavily, like, talking about it, because in the recent years, it's just gotten pretty bad, right? It's been a big problem. So, but one of the challenges that we faced early on was just like you're saying. All we kept hearing was, okay, where's your data? Right? All we're hearing are fish stories, right? So,
and look, I'll say it, right? If the fishermen start telling everybody that every 3 fish I catch get eaten by or every 3rd fish I catch gets eaten by a shark, that's going to get added to the bucket of mortality, dead discards, and you're just going to get less fish to catch next year. So it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
Right. And so it can't be piecemealed. It has to be holistic, and that's really what this EFP is like. Forget all of the other. Now there's still some exclusions, right? If something season's closed or something, you can't include it. But the idea is to let people go out, and this is, the Bahamas been doing this for a long time. You get a 5-gallon bucket and one fish that doesn't fit in the bucket, and that's it. And so we're trying to figure out this program where we can let people go fish, completely eliminate dead discards at least for red snapper in this instance, because you keep every one of them within your 15 fish aggregate, but you have to tell us what you're catching.
Right.
Right. And we've got an app, we got a hail-in program. I really think that we've set this up in a way where this can be best available science, right? And that's what Magnus and Stevens based on, best available science. And at the moment, the MREP phone surveys is it. And so we're just obligated to make fisheries decisions based on that. We need another source of data. And I think that this exempted fishing permit is going to give, one, I think it's exciting, right? And so people can go out and catch fish that other people can't. There's a limited number. So I'm hopeful
try
that
something different.
Yeah, that motivation is going to give people some incentive to go out and actually really, and I got to encourage people, we need people to actually really give the information that these permits are asking for, because I can't go back to the next council meeting. It's probably going to be 2 more before we have this data. And the council won't have the benefit of this information and data if we don't do this the right way. So my hope is when we get back there, we can actually say, hey, look, based on this science, we think that, dead discards are being overestimated by this much. And here's how we should, really approach, fisheries rules in this regard. So, I think there's going to be a mix of, some commercial guys that can get into it and some rec guys that can get into it. Hopefully there's a, good turnout. I know some of the permits had already been allocated.
Yeah, a friend of mine. Did you see that? Yeah.
How do you get a permit?
You apply for it.
Like a quota.
Is there a cost associated to it? You gotta pay for the permit?
I think there is an application fee. I have to go look, but I think it's if you get one.
But it's not like a paying for like a commercial permit kind of thing.
No. It would be more like a quota. And I don't remember if there was a cost. I didn't apply for it. But if like on a quota hunt,
right,
you apply for it, and sometimes they'll hold the money, but sometimes they don't take it till later.
We did get a grant from NOAA to pay for most of the program, so I got to check. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. But if there is a cost,
I think you kind of answered it in my mind, like, because I think the question's more towards driven, like, oh, do you got to pay? Is it a pay-to-play kind of thing?
No.
You know what I mean? But you answered it with the research thing, so it's not kind of like who's making money off this kind of thing. So it's more like there's a processing fee for the application.
Well, he mentioned the captain side of it. A friend of mine got a captain. So there's one small section, right, in like Northeast Florida. A friend of mine got drawn for that. And I want to say there's like 40 of them, or like maybe there's.
I think he can get like 30 fish or something with that permit.
Yeah, it's really cool. So he was really excited to collect the data.
He's able to sell that trip for a pretty penny, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I get you Chris Schultz's number. There you go. Just look him up. And
next show, we're going to have an auction for that trip.
Fundraiser for all Florida right there. You got some too.
I got this here. It says there's Study Fleet, Hotspot Fleet. Southeast Florida Snapper Grouper Fleet. These are all different categories for this.
Yeah, slight variations on them.
Right.
How they're going to work. One of them has, one of the Northeast Hotspot Fleet has like a total boat limit.
Right.
The other ones are individual permits.
Okay.
So like the Southeast Florida, if you get a permit, you go on any charter boat or any boat, you have a different bag limit than everybody else on the boat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So like we can go fishing together, and you can catch 15 red snapper, and I got to throw mine back.
Gotcha.
Which would be interesting kind of comparison.
Sorry,
in the data there, but
it'll be interesting name calling at the dock.
Yeah.
Just put it in your bucket, man.
But and I don't I don't mention this lightly, but there's a lot of opportunity for people to not give us the correct data, but that is the case in anything, right?
Right.
And we face a lot. They're like, oh, well, how do you know you're going to comply with this? I'm like, how do you know people are complying with the current bag limits and not upgrading fish? And
right.
We don't know that. So
is everyone measuring their peanut mahi?
There's a percent of error in it somewhere.
Yeah.
But really hopeful the people that went out of their way to read this stuff, to apply for it, really care. This is a call to all conservationists and fishermen to really step up and help us get the information we need to try and solve this problem for them is ultimately what this is about.
Yeah, because I think, I'll be honest with you, like when you first described it to me, my initial thought was, I don't know if that's going to work, you know what I mean? But I didn't have the right perspective on it being a research program.
If you look even at the Gulf, and neither of us are experts on the Gulf, but like if you look at the Gulf, we went and collected a lot of data in the Gulf with citizen-driven science to get new seasons changed. And then you look at the Gulf red snapper, and it's 120 days or something. So we're going to have to get on the team. Like you said a second ago, if we're conservationists, let's get on the team. Let's help collect this data. Let's know what our numbers are.
Yeah.
Like let's call them what they are, and then figure out a way forward from that.
Yeah, I mean, you got what it looked, for private or for higher vessels, you got 40, I think, something like that, and 800, like 200 per quarter, I think it was, on this other thing. So, I mean, it's going to be a healthy sample size if the people on this list have a good perspective. So,
there's a good
I don't
portion.
know. I think it's pretty good.
This is outside of the existing quota, right? And so, the fact is, if there was 41,000 fish supposed to be taken, there's going to be more than that taken because of these EFPs. There's a healthy number of fish in here. So it's great access for Floridians, great opportunity to get on the water, catch some of these red snappers.
But you're looking for the data.
Bring home some information for me,
but
please.
You're really looking for the data for this. And you know what? And this kind of exemplifies to me, like you're putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. We're saying, okay, there's more that we can do, and this is a program where we can allow the citizens to come in and contribute to the data.
Florida is right, and this is the FWC is the one that did all this. I've had some part in it, but this is FWC and our Florida representation at the South Atlantic Council fighting for Floridians to make sure that we got access to this fishery.
Yeah. All right. Then that's a good thing.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. Then that's a good thing. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss. I'm going to put on my advocate hat. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention like ASA and CCA. Like they've advocated for this stuff as well. Like they are incredibly.
Oh, the CCA got behind this too.
Trip. People don't see Trip, right? Because he's working policy all the time and he's in meetings and in Zoom calls and but those people show up every time at these meetings. Martha from ASA, they show up every time at these meetings and they advocate for recreational anglers over and over and over again. And we get an opportunity to sit here. I think it'd be remiss to not mention like other organizations that do show up and talk about this stuff and care about that stuff. And I know you're good friends with CCA, but CCA and ASA both, like they're incredible partners.
I love the CCA. I mean, it really is. ASA too. CCA we have more of a working relationship with, and they do so much good. They really do. I mean, and it's interesting to see too, because as that organization has grown, you see in different chapters all along the state, some chapters are bigger than others. And we've recently done a lot of work here in Broward with Mike Lambrooks, because it's not like a traditional CCA, which is like more coastal snook inshore kind of stuff where they mostly redfish and they do the most work at. But we've been in recent years trying to do more work in our Broward chapter, because it's not as much of a coastal snookery and fishery.
The people that live on the coast, enjoy the water from right here to wherever they can get to on their boat, right?
I mean,
however much gas you got.
Exactly, 100%.
Or half of it. Half of the gas you got.
To the point you brought up earlier, right? One of the big things that the Broward chapter has been doing is artificial reef, right? And that's been a big step that we've been taking recently.
The fisheries the fisheries have started getting a lot stronger up and down the East Coast. I mean, you see mutton snapper other places, grouper other places, and I can't help but attribute some of that to the ongoing artificial reef programs that they've had. Every county but Monroe County has had one for quite a while. And they've been getting stuff in the water, and I think it's been good for them and good for their fisheries.
Yeah, and I want to also add to that point, like there's not, I think in a lot of ways sometimes the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council might get a bad rap for some of these things that might be out of their control.
The individuals that sit at that council, every single one of them care deeply about our fishery and access to our fishery.
Right.
Every single one of them, I think, goes fishing, engages in fishing, has family members that engage in fishing, work on a commercial boat, you name it. I mean, that group of people, and I've spent a lot of time with them, care deeply about this. But as I mentioned to you, to some extent, there's a framework of rules that we've got to work through. We've got to work within. And so I think we're starting to try to do our best to figure out how do we supplement that? What do we need to do to within that framework, make sure we're getting better data, make sure we're getting better information to make rules that align more with what people are seeing in real life out there on the water.
Yeah, and one of the recent data things was just simple as the 16-inch to 18-inch rule on the mutton. Right, made a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
So and look, so has the closure of Western Dry Rocks, right? And so, I'm not here to say like any regulations are bad. Absolutely not.
Right.
Without some of these things, we wouldn't have some of the fisheries we do have. But sometimes we get it wrong. And when we get it wrong, and we have firsthand evidence that shows us. We just need to think about, go back to the toolbox and say, are we using the right tool? Do we need a different one? How do we adapt to this? And I think it's been, again, all great people, from the folks at the Southeast Science Center to the staff at South Atlantic Council, the members, all incredible people trying to do the best we can within the framework. And, really, again, back to the CFP thing is about, and the state snapper, the state refish survey that FWC started years ago, I think was probably what kicked off things in the Gulf, because they had actual data that allowed them to say, hey, that doesn't make sense. The dots aren't connecting. Let's look at this further. They've got that on the South Atlantic as well. We've been able to leverage that to take over management of some species, and so I think that has kind of, Florida's just always going to continue to lead the way on these conservation issues, whether it's on the water or on land, and just, really, really proud to be part of that group of people that are working on this.
Yeah, 100%. And we've been talking mostly about recreational, right? As we kind of move the conversation a little bit to commercial, I mean,
I'm talking about fish stocks, right? and no, I'm serious. That's where I want all of my commercial and rec guys to, I own restaurants. We own, not I, my family owns. I happen to work for them. We own restaurants. We own hotels. We own a fish house. We own commercial fish stocks. We own recreational fish stocks. I own a boat storage facility. I don't distinguish between the two, right?
Okay.
My rec guys and my commercial guys need access to these fish. What I'm focused on is making sure that fish abundance and populations are at their best possible point, right?
You want to optimize the number of fish.
Absolutely.
Right.
Across the board. And then we can figure out how we're cutting that pie up. But I think we've spent a lot of time, and as I've gotten into some of these issues and start working on them, it's funny how people are like, well, who, is that the rec guys? I say, guys, I'm just trying to get more fish. Who cares who it's for right now? Let's just go figure out how to have the ocean have more fish in it. Then we can figure out how to chop that stuff up.
Right. Is any of these, with the data aspect of it and the commercial guys, are you making more strides to kind of maybe come up with more unique programs on that end as well? On
the commercial side?
Yeah.
You mean as far as like quota allocations?
Yeah,
or?
As far as more incentives for them to be reporting things, or they have more regulations, more requirements to report, right?
I think we've got pretty good data coming from the commercial sector.
Okay.
Yeah. I do have some issues, and like we had this conversation at our last meeting. It was suggested that we needed to put a restriction, an aggregate bag limit, because there was misidentification between gag grouper and black grouper. Mm-hmm. Turns out it's not actually the case. It's reporting at commercial fish houses because it's just easier to mark a gag as a black, and they're better. That was happening, and so that data somehow got into, we're making rules on limiting black grouper because of misidentification in a fish house. I'm like, guys, this is crazy. We can't be doing, that doesn't make any sense. So there's certainly some things that I think we can, and everybody's got ways to improve.
Right.
But I think the commercial sector, I'll just say, I think they get a bad rap to some extent. They're fishing within the laws and the rules that they were given. Do they have a bigger lobby? Maybe, maybe not. We just talked about ASA and some of these other groups, and so I think both sides are pretty well represented. Mm-hmm. I just think we're not working collaboratively to solve the issue, which is we have a declining biomass of fish across the board. Most of it's tied to habitat, right?
And so let's get more fish, and then we can fight over who gets what.
Who got some?
You won't even need to have a fight. Let's just get more fish. The other thing that I'll say on the commercial side that I'm a big advocate for, because we struggle. Our fish house has had really, really big troubles competing. Our restaurant is struggling a little bit in competing. Not that the restaurant's struggling, but on the fish product. I've got restaurants in Key West and all over the state that are bringing in frozen yellowtail from South America.
Right.
Or mahi-mahi or this or that, whatever they're advertising it as local. And so we can't here, with our requirements and our regulatory scheme and everything else, we can't compete. So we need to do something from a regulatory perspective to help protect some of our fish product. I think that's the biggest thing we're doing, quantity over quality right now, right? And so our lobster price is down, our snapper prices are down, mostly because of the poor quality stuff that's coming from other places that aren't controlled like we are. If we marketed that stuff the right way and we drove prices better, maybe we can make more money on less fish. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe our guys wouldn't have so much pressure to go out and catch as much as they do if it was, bringing them a better yield and a better bottom line. And so this is, we haven't spent too much time talking on that, but I'm certainly doing what I can to work with Department of Agriculture and Fresh from Florida to incorporate fish product in a more robust way, with maybe some type of certification program or other. FWC certainly on board with that. I know some of the Southeast Shrimp Alliance and some of the other groups in Pocketed are kind of working on that, but as a whole, we need to get better at that and create more value for our commercial fishery. Which, I'll say, I from a cultural and economic perspective, is a really, really big deal for the state of Florida.
Yeah, and I think that's really great that you brought that part up, and it exemplifies, I think, the vet. You're the right guy in this position because you do have perspective on both sides of that. Right, and you see that commercial, economic end to it. So and understanding, like, from the commercial fisheries aspect, that there's a means to the end, and it does result or cause a result for everything else. So it's interesting to bring up
as a rec guy. When I growing up, when I heard the word commercial, I would always kind of oh that's going to get dicey to talk about.
Right.
But as you learn more about it, it's like critically important to our state, to our economy, to fish stocks, to everything else. Like, they
got the best data right now, so if nothing else, they got all the best information because of VMS reporting, everything else. I mean, some of our best perspective into the fishery today is coming through the lens of the commercial fisherman.
Right. I want to talk. All right, so we talked a little bit about this next topic earlier, right? And I want to really bring this up to you because with the shark depredation. Mm-hmm. Right, things that we face, and you mentioned the whole chalk it up to discard. That's how it's going to looked at and everything like that. We need to collect the data and everything like that. But realistically speaking, I mean, you have to see it as well. I mean, it's a big issue.
It's a huge issue.
And it's sometimes tough. It's like a grasping at straws situation to where, like, well, what the hell do we do about it? You know what I mean? Or what can be done about it?
We have once again allowed emotion to contaminate our our management protocols. I mean, look, I've spent some time, whether it's Jimmy Hall or my guys down in Key West, the same story, right? The commercial shark fishery is struggling because of the fin ban, right? And so the most valuable part of a shark, you can go catch a shark, you can sell every part of that shark except for the most valuable part, which you have to throw in the trash. Like, this has got. I'm like, somebody shake me and wake me up. We didn't really pass. Our Congress didn't really do that, did they? No, they did. They have said you've got to throw shark fins in the water because other places in the world, sharks are being exploited for their fins. So the only sustainable shark fin fishery in the world we shut down for what? Do we think that the Chinese are consuming less shark fin soup? Absolutely not. They've just gone to other places now to get those fins. It's gone so far now that shark fishermen in the U.S. now are freezing entire sharks, putting them in a container, and sending them overseas to remove the fins to sell them. But that's insane.
So think of the cost of that.
That's insane.
It is insane. It's taken a while for it to get back to that place, but the demand's so high that that's now happening.
Right.
And so as a result, you just have less people fishing for sharks because the economic value is not there. We are not meeting our shark quota.
Right.
If we're not meeting our shark quota, the entire system's out of balance. You're seeing it. That's why we have shark depredation. And so I say that facetiously, but I don't want to promote shark regulation purely because of depredation issues. We should be promoting shark fishing because there was a quota set, which is what is supposed to be taken in order to create optimum yield for all of these stocks. We're not getting there.
Right.
And because of a fin ban that is wholly emotional, and I think is terrible
law,
and is having a very negative effect on our environment, and we're seeing it firsthand.
Well, first of all, thank you for discussing it. Because I know someone in your position, it's not the easiest thing maybe to bring up. You know what I mean, or to talk about, because in the past we've tried to bring it up to other organizations, and they would just punt that over to HMS and just be like, well, bring it up to them, you know what I mean? And it has nothing to do with us because no one wanted to really talk about it. So thank you for discussing it, like, first and foremost. It's kind of cool of you to do that. What can be done in your mind?
So I think we need a congressional fix to this, right?
Okay.
I mean, there has to be...
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I mean, and there's some legislation floating around now. The Shark Act. I think
ASA's
led it, and some of the other groups. So we've got to revisit this. That's the only way. But we've got a federal law that prohibits the sale of shark fins right now, and I mean, I think we're at like 30 or 20 or 30% of the quota in the Gulf of Mexico for sharks.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, it's not good at all.
They're out there eating 24/7, 365, and I assure you that, Travis and I couldn't keep up with a small shark.
I don't know if I don't know the data. I mean, I don't know the stats, right? But one of the biggest fears that we had as a fishing community was we don't want this to be an issue where it becomes too late, where more shark attacks are on the rise. Right?
That's already happening.
I know, and it's I'm saying I don't have the stats, but just from the naked eye, you see it all the time now, and it's just like, man, it's especially in the shallow water situations.
You had Rufus and his son on, like, right?
Rufus is that's kind of a unique circumstance. We had Rufus, but we've seen it in a ton of other places. With Rufus's son Marlon, he was over there in Long Island, Bahama, and you know how the marinas are there with the way the sharks are, because there's no regulation on whether or not you can discard your carcasses. So these sharks accumulate. He slipped on a covering board and fell in a pile of them. But it's
like falling into a bucket of broken glass.
Yeah,
you're going to get hurt. There's no, and it's not their fault, right? I mean, they're just eating.
Right.
But I
think it sucks though. But we have seen, like, even along coastlines, like, I'm at the point where I'm just like, now if I bring my kids into the water
there's
on
been
the beach,
more shark attacks
I'm
in the Florida Keys in the last couple of years than there was my entire life growing up.
Right.
Just in the last couple of years. I grew up spearfishing. I'm not taking my kids spearfishing right now.
Right.
When I was 6, 7 years old, I had a spear gun. I'd jump off the dock. I'd go dive. My dad take me spearfishing. I'd be comfortable. I could hold a fish most of the day. We're to a place where it's actually dangerous potentially to be in the water if you don't know what you're doing, and that's why for adults, fine. You know what you're doing. Handle your fish. Get it back to the boat. But as a young kid, it's something I'd be a little concerned about right now. And I don't like to say that. I mean, this has resounding effects for Florida beaches, for industry, for tourism.
Yeah.
I think it's time, for some of the other industries to get involved in this. I mean, this shark fin ban has now impacted the tourism industry in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
It's a big problem.
Yeah, no, it's a big issue, and hopefully something can be done congressionally, but I don't know. Like,
I think
what
will.
needs to be brought to the table, and who needs to bring that to the table, we'll see, But
yeah. And look, this is one issue that we just talked about, commercial and rec guys, right? Like, this is our opportunity to sit down together and work together on something, ASA and all of the groups that are supporting rec fishing, work with the commercial fishing lobbies and other folks. I mean, this is one that's directly in the center of the Venn diagram. We should leave everything else aside and figure out how to work together to go get this done. And in that victory, I think we will find some friends, across these industries that we can pivot and work on additional issues that are facing us.
Yeah, and this is very much a biosphere specific issue too, because like the way we have sharks here is not the same as like they might be in different parts of the world. Like, oh, where did all the sharks go? It's like, well, hey, they're all in Florida. If you're looking for them, they're all here.
We've got plenty of them right now.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up to you.
But that's not just Florida, right? This federal shark ban is impact. I mean, Louisiana. I can only imagine what's happening behind the shrimp boats in Louisiana.
Yeah, 100%.
And some of these other places,
100%,
right? I mean, but that's probably leaking out everywhere. I mean, you can go anywhere in the Keys on the reef right now and stop, and you're going to have a big sandbar bull shark come to you in a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you run the risk with any regulation of that cobra effect. The
negative externalities.
Well, yeah, it's like, in India they had the cobra issue, so they hired all these cobra hunters to go out and catch all the cobras. You know what I mean? And what they realized,
rats or something.
No, what they realized, they created an industry, and all these guys. And once they eliminated all the cobras, all these guys that now became cobra hunters, they were making money. They were paying them like per cobra. They're like, oh, there's no more cobras. We're out of a job. They started planting cobras in people's houses, and then they started getting called, right? And they're like, hey, cool, we'll come catch your cobra. And what turns out, by doing so, they eliminated the cobra problem. But once they didn't eliminate the economic problem that created, right? It's unintended circumstances, right?
They pass ended a federal law that requires all NGOs to sunset. If you don't solve the problem you were created to solve within 10 years, you got to go away because you ain't doing no good.
Exactly. So they ended up having more cobras than they ever saw before in the first place. So that was like the unintended circumstance. That's always been a big fear of like trying to control this stuff too much and being the watchdog of it. It's like you don't create some unintended circumstance. You know what I mean? That you can fall back on. But
We've created a lot of interesting industries in the environmental world. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's mind-boggling, but the shark issue is always been, one of those tough nuts to crack. I mean, once you're right though. Once the congressional thing happened, we started seeing more of the sandbars showing up, and and the bull sharks are just tough to manage and deal with. I mean, you're allowed to harvest a bull shark like per
one shark
trip,
per boat.
But it's like, who's going to do that though?
What do you do with it?
I mean, what do you do with it?
We're not wasters.
No one
right?
wants to bring that on their boat in the first place.
No, and it's unfortunate that they're going to push the fishing community back to everybody taking a shark, because that's the only way to control this at some point. I mean, that's coming, right? I mean, if not already happening.
We've already seen that uptick happen.
Yeah, and that's a shame. I mean, it's a shame to see that thing wasted, right? I mean, it is an animal that has value,
right?
It's part of our ecosystem.
They're cool animals.
And that's the thing. And I want to kind of dispel that. Like, a lot of people will think that, with the fisherman community and the shark issue, they think they just want sharks to die and they want to kill them all. And they'll have the shark tournaments. And a lot of the shark tournaments have taken the perspective that they want to do this to collect the data, right, during the tournament. And that's an important thing to do. But a lot of people on other sides of the aisle or don't have the outdoorsman perspective, don't see it that way, and they're just looking at them as the shark killers. And I don't see many fishermen. They just want their fishery back. That's it. They don't want to go out there. They don't want to become shark murderers.
They just want a balanced ecosystem, because it's better for everything. It's better for the sharks too. I mean, right, to have the right number. And somewhat of an unpopular opinion, but you can draw a parallel between sharks, wolves, bears, any predators. I mean, if it's in the food chain, we have to be able to regulate it and to make sure that we're creating a balanced ecosystem.
100%. 100%.
I was going to say something a minute ago. I mentioned something earlier about collaboration, and you talked about getting the reg side and the commercial side together. Mm-hmm. And I think something that's interesting is when you can work on something like sharks, you begin to know the guy sitting, like, you're no longer the commercial guy, you're Dennis.
Yeah.
You're no longer the red guy, your buddy, and so,
an ally, even if it's just for this moment.
And when you get each other's names, you start to see the person, and that I talk about the whole last person concept, like this idea of, it's easy for me to get pissed at the council. It's easy for me to get pissed at FWC. It's easy for me to get pissed at DEP or the Congress or whoever. But once I get to know those people, now I've got people that I know them by name and I can work with them. Mm-hmm. I think we've not done a good job of getting together enough on that stuff. And that's not like ASA has, CCA has, but like we've got to do a better job of growing that coalition to work on that stuff together.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's really important. You and I have discussed this in the past. It's really important to show up.
Yeah. That's how you get to know each other. You show up.
Go to the meeting. Go to the important thing. You know what I mean? Go to the monumental time that this has happened, because as we stated earlier, we are at a crucial point in time for conservation in the state of Florida, both inshore and offshore, both on,
dry land,
rivers,
and wet
lakes,
stuff.
dry land, exactly. Rivers, lakes, and streams, and everything in between. And it really is a crucial time in Florida. I mean, especially we got so many people moving here every day, and those people that don't understand Florida completely need to be educated, like right off the bat, right? And say, listen, this is the place you're moving to. This is not like other lands in the state. Right? We are a unique ecosystem. It is completely different from where you came from. I can guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
The Everglades alone.
Dude, pick a spot.
Yeah.
The Lake Wales, Lake Wales Ridge. You can pick the Keys. Like, it's just everywhere you go up and down the state is unique and special.
Yeah. So I think we have a responsibility as Floridians of just being stewards of the land and the waters, and educating people and making this part of our mantra, and part of our what we live and breathe.
Absolutely.
And just it's the responsibility of every Floridian, because if not us, then who? If not now, then when?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Spot on.
Just defined Floridian.
Yeah. So I mean,
well, look, I gotta say, special thank you to you for allowing us to use your platform, for caring about this, for having the discussion. I mean, this is an important thing. So, big thanks to you. Big thanks to Connected by Water for hosting us today and pushing this message out. And
that means a lot. I mean, it really does. Listen, we started this show like everyone's like, oh, why'd you start a podcast? And my early answer in episodes 1 through 20, right, were, well, last I checked, no other marine life artist had a podcast. So that to me was reason enough to do it. Right. And I just wanted to do it. It was fun. You know what I mean? I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to bring in, I know a lot of people in the community. It just seemed like a great way to get everyone together, connected by water and everything like that. And as the years went on, and as the conversation started getting deeper and more meaningful, conservation really was just evolved into our mission. Right. And not that it was something that I found out about brand new. It's just something that it was always been there in my heart, in the back of my mind, and in my head. And then you just start paying attention. You start having these conversations with everyone. You look around. You're like, well, yeah, now is the time. This is getting pretty to critical mass important right now. And so it's become our mission on the show, and it's become our main topic of conversation from all aspects of it. And if you think about the term "connected by water," it is our state. You know what I mean? And that's why we named it that. My wife originally said, oh, well, everyone that's coming on the show, what are they going to be talking to you? Well, how are they connected to you? It was more than just fishing. You know what I mean? I said, well, they're connected by water. She goes, why don't you name it that? So I credit her for that. And then it really just caught on with us, and it had these different layers of meaning to it all through, right? So that's it. So we created the show, and we created this company, and, conservation's our mission, because without that as a Floridian, we really, like we discussed earlier, we have nothing. At this state, we're not Manhattan. We are not made of granite. We cannot start building these buildings that are here. We cannot sustain it. We are a land of sinkholes, and we are a land of soft sand and fertile waters and flowing rivers, and it's just not who we are. We have to be who we are.
Amen.
So
I'm here for it.
Yeah. I have to ask you both a question.
Come on.
That we ask a lot of people on the show, and I don't think I asked you this, right?
Yep.
So, both as fishermen, what's your one that got away?
Do you want to go first? Or me to
No,
go first?
you go ahead.
Everyone's got one.
So, I'm wearing an RJ Boyle shirt. I actually went into RJ Boyle studio before I came
We
here.
won't hold that against you. It's cool.
I
love you, RJ.
It's the first time I walked in there. But I started sword fishing in 2004 on a Conch 27, sophomore in high
Great
school.
boat.
And me and my buddies, my dad was crazy enough to let us take the boat by ourselves, and we spent a lot of time at the East Crack. And I think the first rig I dropped was a 2-liter bottle of soda full of sand. It turned into a mess. I tangled more gear than I care to remember. This was before you could go online and watch somebody do it and just figure it out, right? But we had heard of some guys up here catching swordfish during the day and thought it was really cool, and so we started kind of trying it and figuring it ourselves. And about 2 years into it, started to actually hook fish. Lost a couple, but one of those fish that I hooked, he ate on the bottom and swam straight up to the surface, and we had a big bow in the line, and I'm just whining like, I don't know what happened to get cut off. We have fish coming up. I turn around and look over my left shoulder on the opposite side of the boat, and a big bow line going this way. It must have been a 600 or 700 pound fish. Completely in the air.
Man,
I'm like, oh my goodness. Fish jumped back down, sounded again, came up to the surface, and he's just swimming. I see his dorsal fin just swimming on the surface away from us. So we're in the boat and we're riding, trying to catch up to the fish. As I'm getting up to it, my buddy's driving. I got the harpoon, getting ready to throw it, and I swear, just looked at me, turned to the side, sounded again, and we lost that fish on that run. That was I got bit by a sword that day, and I spent a lot of time at the East Crack after that chasing.
Trying to fix that, trying to scratch that itch.
I still never caught one over 300 pounds. I've caught a lot of them, but never caught one over 300 pounds. But that fish is one that that fish looked into my soul. I looked into his that day, and I don't know if it's old man in the sea type story or what, but that's the one that I go to sleep thinking about.
That's a great story. I don't want to follow that.
Yeah. No, you got it though. Come on. Give it to me.
So the house I live in now, I grew up on the same street house I live in now.
Okay.
So my parents still live there, and the house I live in now, they dug fill out of the swamp, out of the wetland, and built up where the houses are. And the guy that lived there stocked it with bass. And so I got a freshwater story. So he allowed me to come down there and fish every day. And so every day after school, I played basketball, I'd do basketball practice, and I'd go home and I would go fish in that pond. If I couldn't go somewhere else, I was going to that pond.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a storm, and there was a stick. I can still visualize it. There was a stick sitting out there, and I was like, "Oh, dude, there's got to be a fish sitting next to that." And we never caught bass. We catch a lot of catfish and stuff. We never caught bass. And this monster bass hit it. And he had put like a 7 or 8 pounder in there, and that had to be the fish. I don't know how long ago he put it. But I fight this, and my sister comes up to get me for dinner. And I'm fighting this fish like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Like, it felt like an hour, but like it couldn't have been very long. It's a bass in a pond. And I get him up, and I high sticked him. And I was probably like 11, 12, 13 years old. And I high sticked him, and that bass just laid there for a second, and I looked at him, and the same thing, man. I couldn't see with both eyes, but that one eye, and he flicked his tail and was gone. And my sister was there. She saw it. She's like, "That was the biggest bass I've ever seen in my life, Trav." And I was like, my heart was racing. I was so excited, but there was nothing, like, we didn't have a phone.
Got to drain the pond.
Yeah,
man.
you don't know. And it's just like, man, after that, like, I had to get that feeling again.
Right.
And it didn't matter what it was. Like, I just had to get that feeling again. Like, it's an addictive. It's just like you got bit by the sword. Like, you.
Yeah. I've gone full circle now. Now I'm catching small fish with my kids and getting just as much joy out of it. But excited about, getting. I was just telling Travis, we're working on building a new boat, and I'm getting my gear set back up, and excited to get my kids into that next phase again. But man, there's nothing like it.
The next 5 years for you are going to be fun.
A lot of fun.
Oh my God, I have 11-year-old son, 13-year-old girl, and
bring them down and go fishing with me.
Yeah,
let's do it.
All right, cool.
Yeah, when my daughter was that age, the boat didn't leave the dock. She was on it.
Yeah, Travis told you early on. Anything I do, we could have a business meeting. Bring your wife and kids.
Yeah,
happy to sit there with them.
That's how we're rolling too. This
awesome,
is the last episode from this gallery. That's it.
Been a heck of a run, right?
Been a good run, but listen, we have bigger fish to fry, so to speak, for the mission that we have here at Connected by Water.
You having a sale coming up this weekend?
We have a sale coming up this weekend. This is going to air after that.
Yeah.
So
for the 5 people that know me that are watching this, I'm telling you right now, there's some amazing artwork on the walls right here. So
thank you.
Get on their website, whatever.
It will be available on connectedbywater.com.
There you
All
go.
of it. We do have a trailer. We're going to be doing some things like that. We're going to be a lot of promotion. But listen, like I said before, like, conservation's our mission here. And that's really what Connected by Water has evolved to be. We are always going to be in our studio. We are always going to be a creative studio. The business is fine. Everything else is going. We're operating just fine. It's just we're just getting rid of this gallery because in a lot of ways it's just holding us back from the true work that we want to do. Yep. So and that's it. That's all there is to it. The podcast is still going to be flowing. The artwork's still going to be flowing. There's no problem with that. So. Vote yes on 2.
Vote yes on 2.
Right. Yeah. I want to kind of close with reiterating, vote yes on 2.
Without that, everything we just talked about doesn't mean
it's irrelevant. Right. It's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything we just talked about.
Exactly. How could I paint fish for a living if I don't vote yes on 2?
That's what you were talking earlier, and I was like, you're sitting in a studio. Whether you never went fishing, if you paint fish, like, who's buying those?
Right.
Guys that care about fishing,
100%.
wild, like. It's got to have it. Got to vote yes on 2.
Yep. Robert Buddy Spottswood Jr., thank you very much for giving me your time today. Travis Thompson, thank you very much for giving me your time today. You gentlemen are just wonderful.
Thanks for having us, man.
I don't ever know any other way to say it. You embody so many principles that many people should really just change their perspective on everything that they do and care for from an outdoorsman, sportsman's perspective. And thank you for exemplifying all those great qualities. So we appreciate your time, both of you guys today. Thank you for coming all the way in from Key West. Thank you for coming in all the way in from the Great White North.
Imperial Polk County, the land of Grady Judd.
Dennis, thank you. Thanks again, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So
thank you.
We'll get together soon. Right?
Let's do it.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll end this like we always do, right? Your ego is not your amigo. Always do your best. At the end of the day, just let God do the rest. Do not ever forget that no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're all connected by water.
Heck
Amen to that.
Cheers.